For a brief, glorious moment in the late 1990s, nu metal was among the most popular styles of music in the world. It had exploded onto the scene from seemingly nowhere and became inescapable, inspiring countless musicians to incorporate its distinctive sound into their own work. Many of these hopeful artists then found out the hard way that much of this music scene's mainstream appeal was in its novelty. It's right there in the name, nu metal. Once it wasn't new anymore, it fell out of favor as quickly as it had appeared, leaving all but the biggest names forgotten, and the stories of many nu metal bands remain untold. The tale of a band called Snot is not one such story. This group of rising stars were just beginning to make a name for themselves when their journey came to an abrupt end, leaving them well remembered for their misfortune more so than their music. Today, we're going to take a look at what Snot and ultra-charismatic frontman Lynn Strait were trying to say to the world before their legacy was overshadowed by tragedy.
Do I have to get naked people for you to remember my name? It's Lynn from Snot.
Back in 1993, a group of talented musicians formed a promising new band. These young men had all paid their dues, each having done their time on stage, honing their craft as songwriters and performers in different bands. And they had a hunger for a big break to match their excellent collaborative chemistry now that they had found each other. This crew featured the likes of John Fonstock, aka Tumor on bass, Sonny Mayo on guitar, and 19-year-old wunderkind drummer Jamie Miller, and they were on the verge of showing the world what they could do with a debut album that would put them on the map. Their band was called MF Pitbulls. A musician named Shannon Larkin, well known for his work with Wrathchild and famous today for spending 2 decades as the drummer for Godsmack, assembled this elite team from the Baltimore and DC music scenes to form a groove metal outfit for which he would be the frontman. However, for reasons unknown, MF Pitbull's completed debut album would never see the light of day. A handful of random tracks and leaked demos serve as the only proof that this band ever even existed. Shannon instead crossed the country to sunny California to play with Ugly Kid Joe, while the rest of the band was left out in the cold. Pitbulls would not be the ticket to stardom for these ambitious artists, but it wasn't long before they found a boxer who would be. Lynn Strait's family settled in Santa Barbara, California when he was 10 years old. As a teenager, he got involved with the local punk scene during the heyday of West Coast hardcore. This quickly became his life's passion, and by the time he turned 20, he was forging a path to becoming an artist himself by playing bass in a thrash metal band called Lethal Dose. Unfortunately, he also faced the possibility of a different kind of lethal dose. The music scene he loved gave him access to hard drugs. Soon, he became hooked on heroin, and he fed this habit by committing a string of armed robberies. A lengthy stint in jail forced him to kick his addiction, and after his release, he decided to make some changes in his life. Specifically, he changed from being a bassist to a vocalist. Lynn's fearlessness as a performer made him a once-in-a-lifetime frontman just waiting to be discovered, and his natural charisma leapt off the stage. Literally. While performing at a bar with a punk band called Glue, Lynn flipped off of the stage and onto one of the tables, destroying the drinks and pizza people were enjoying in an act of wildly overzealous showmanship that was witnessed by one Mikey Doling. Mikey was an experienced guitarist from nearby Indio who had recently left a band called Chronix and was already recording instrumental tracks to get his own band going, but he still needed a singer. He was familiar with Lynn's work as a bassist, so he was pleasantly surprised to see this familiar face had taken so well to the exact role that he was already on the lookout for. And soon, he knew he had to get Lynn some crowds to surf on before any more innocent pizza had to die. From this chance meeting, Lynn and Mikey became fast friends and were eager to collaborate on a band called Snot. Lynn's dedication to Snot kept him clean, which also meant that he was done committing serious crimes, though he always kept a memento of his lawless past. A loaded gun, which was on his person at all times, just in case. He had a reputation as the most lovable guy you could ever meet, but you did not, under any circumstances, want to fuck with Lynn Strait. With bad habits at bay, though, Lynn and Mikey began diligently writing material for Snot that combined their respective loves of punk and metal, but they struggled to find a rhythm section that could keep up with them. Luckily, Mikey had also befriended Shannon Larkin, who still had a lightly used band just waiting for an opportunity like this. He hooked Snot up with Sonny, Jamie, and Toomer from MF Pitbulls, and they brought their love of funk music to the heavy sound Mikey and Lynn were already working with to form their own fusion genre, which Lynn dubbed Americore for its combining of styles that were popular on the East and West coasts of America. Coincidentally, their new sound bore a striking resemblance to another subgenre that had recently emerged from the SoCal area and was about to explode into global domination: nu metal. Snot burst onto the scene with unprecedented alacrity, booking shows in Los Angeles clubs almost every night the moment they had enough material to do so. They were in a unique position of riding a musical trend in its early days of popularity while demonstrating a sincerity that set them apart from the rest, which resonated with crowds and had them playing sold-out headlining shows about a year after formation. Such strong buzz quickly garnered industry attention, and they soon had their pick of labels. They chose to sign with major label Geffen Records in 1996, and they got a pretty sweet deal for such a new band. Geffen took a hands-off approach, giving them complete creative control and enough of a signing bonus to rent a house together, where they could focus on practicing and writing all day, further accelerating their career aspirations. Their nearby practice space was right next door to a strip club, and Lynn was known for sweet-talking the strippers into coming over to their house, then getting them to do chores and cook meals while the band was working. Just another example of men's success built off the unpaid and uncredited labor of women. On May 13th, 1997, the local phenomenon that was Snot went nationwide with the release of their debut album, Get Some. They chose Lynn's beloved boxer, Dobbs, to be their mascot. That's him on the cover, balancing his favorite treat on his snout, a lemon from the tree in their front yard. Putting an instantly lovable face on the band set them apart from the bleak edgelord stuff their peers were going with, and you'd think standing out like that would give the album a boost in appeal. But it struggled on release to live up to the high hopes Snot and Geffen had for it. The people who liked it loved it. But Get Some is a grower, not a shower, and some listeners underestimated it the instant they heard the sleazy, debaucherous lyrics of a few prominent tracks and just wrote the whole thing off. The label got to work on remedying this, but seemed to be taking their sweet time, waiting over a year to even begin producing the first promotional single, so Lynn took matters into his own hands. At Ozfest 1998, during the July 9th date in Mansfield, Massachusetts, Limp Bizkit brought a giant 13-foot-tall toilet on stage as a prop for their set. While they were playing to thousands of fans, Lynn emerged from inside the toilet, wearing nothing but a pair of boxers and a huge sticker with Snot's logo across his chest, and the boxers didn't stay on for long. He had with him a groupie dressed as a dominatrix, and briefly received fellatio before fleeing the scene with security hot on his heels. He sought refuge in Ozzy Osbourne's dressing room, where Ozzy's wife Sharon got him some clothes, ushered him out the back door, and covered for him when security came knocking. He was nonetheless captured soon after, and during his ensuing interrogation, he claimed that his name was Dave Mustaine on legally binding documents, earning him an additional criminal charge for impersonation on top of the public indecency. He did, however, narrowly avoid a possession charge by stashing his weed in a cooler while grabbing a drink and retrieving it after he was dismissed. Obviously, an album featuring a personality this big is must-hear material, and Get Some begins by telling you about the subject Snot knows best: themselves.
Say something for the record. Tell the people what you feel.
Fuck the record.
Fuck the record.
And fuck the people.
Fuck the
You don't think along the same lines I do, you better get out of line, buckwheat.
The song Snot, by Snot, throws you right into the deep end of what the band has to offer. A funk-inspired riff and raspy punk shouting bring the energy of a live performance to lyrics that are designed to make Snot your favorite band in the world for the 3.5 minutes after they take the stage. They make great use of that full runtime with bold choices, like solo showcases for both the drums and bass, to demonstrate the kind of singular, cohesive force their eclectic style is built upon. It all makes for an unapologetically heavy song that doesn't come across as angry or off-putting, so everyone knows that they too are invited to this party. Lynn's vocal delivery favors conveying the emotion behind the words over clear enunciation of the words themselves, which is consistent throughout the album and can make it hard to parse the specifics of the subject he's singing about. But for this track, it should be clear as day that he's promising to play a show you'll never forget and follow it up with sinful rockstar tomfoolery, Haters Be Damned. Snot has much deeper thoughts to offer elsewhere, but if you prefer to remember them as party animals with a unique take on nu metal and hardcore punk, I couldn't blame you. It's certainly among the things they do best. However, if you had concerns about this track's attitude of hyper-masculine posturing, the casual objectification of women, and the biker shouting a white supremacist dog whistle in the intro, then you'd have good reason to be disturbed by the opening lines of the next song, until the reason behind them is made clear. In modern times, where these are things you might well hear verbatim from the highest offices of the US government, it's a relief to know that Lynn is expressing the hateful sentiments of a would-be domestic terrorist to condemn them. Much of the rest of the song consists of repetition of these lyrics and very similar ones, only deviating significantly in the bridge, where he addresses bigots directly with hope they'll free themselves from a life of ignorance, fear, and rage. He warns that these are not simply harmless ideas. They invariably lead to real-world violence, which is especially true when hate speech is normalized enough to gain political dominance, and institutional violence can build into true historic atrocity. It's kind of a shame that the song's title is the word stupid, misspelled. That word only appears once, during the bridge, which is otherwise a compassionate plea for bigots to understand the people they hate. Not only is it ableist to conflate a perceived lack of intelligence with malignant beliefs, it also lets bad actors off the hook for the intent behind their words. When hatred becomes this overt, it usually stems from a place of intentional support for white supremacy, which is perfectly self-serving and logical, in a contemptible Randian way. If cruelty materially cements your dominance over others, it's not stupid to be cruel, but it is cruel, which for the record, is very bad. If white supremacists were to face consequences that put them in a worse place than they'd be in if they just kept their racist mouths shut, well, that might correct our misconceptions about how great white supremacy is. Education on matters of diversity, equality, and inclusivity will always be an important line of defense as well, though, which is why we see modern institutional power attacking education and DEI initiatives, and defending them is necessary to prevent bigotry from becoming even more casually acceptable in polite society. After all, if you've never learned your history, you may not even realize it when your nation's leaders are following in Hitler's goose steps. Ultimately, this song uses few words to discuss the extremely complex issue of how and why hate can become part of a person's identity. The choice to make those words as shocking as possible makes the most of what little is said here for a heavy but hopeful expression of this important message. Whoever sequenced the album must have thought we needed a break already, because Stupid is followed by Joyride, a song with no message, no deep meaning, not even enough lyrical import to bother including it in the liner notes. Just an ode to driving irresponsibly. Mikey has said that Lynn could be pretty wild behind the wheel, and the detail that the driver is wielding a .44 caliber pistol during his rampage goes to show a kind of wish fulfillment behind this song, if not outright confessions to numerous moving violations. I've always loved Joyride, it's a blast, but the sound of a car crash in the closing moments has gone on to haunt the band as one of the most memorable things on this record. So, I've been doing media discussion on the internet for over a decade, and something I've seen a lot in my comment sections is first. Only slightly less common, though, is stuff to the effect of, I wish you/this thing didn't make everything about politics. I turned to entertainment to escape from real-world stuff. Many of the best examples of apolitical, escapist media are found in mainstream entertainment, like Marvel movies, many of which gave the American government script approval and a positive on-screen portrayal in exchange for access to authentic military resources. Or there's the wildly popular Call of Duty games, especially the Black Ops series, written by a guy whose depiction of the military did so well by them that they hired him as a consultant. Okay, but at least you can turn to the comfort and safety of a classic Game Boy game. On your fucking attack drone retro console made by arms manufacturer Palmer Luckey, a literal thing that actually exists. It's beyond satire how invested the military-industrial complex is in turning popular culture into political propaganda. Like, it would be hilarious that Kelly Clarkson, Guy Fieri, and The Price is Right are funded by the Pentagon, if it wasn't terrifying. And even that is just the tip of the iceberg. The irony is that these things all usually get a pass, despite having an on-the-record political bias, while creators of small independent productions face constant attacks from the people they're hoping to reach with their art, and now they're the first to suffer under increasingly aggressive efforts toward outright censorship from the wielders of capital and political power. Every day, it gets just a little bit harder to think outside the box. The next Snot song is sort of a companion piece to Stupid, with a more generalized message of resisting conformity, i.e., thinking outside the box. The most obvious target of ire here is television, with lyrics depicting one child exposed to idealized heroes, and showing how those traits that they admired while growing up continue to influence what the kid thinks into adulthood. The soaring guitars of the chorus crest right after Lynn asks,
To kill or...
There's an apocryphal story about how naval recruitment spiked by 500% in the year following the release of Top Gun. The real figure there is only 8.3%. No metric would bring it close to the one that was incorrectly popularized in 2004. However, this still represents a change of over 7,000 individuals, and while it's unclear if any of them chose this path because of Top Gun's on-screen glorification, this would be considered a massive success of the military entertainment complex. The point of pop culture's enthusiastic participation in propaganda isn't for a single movie to sextuple the amount of people looking to dedicate their lives to service, but rather to inundate the entire populace with sympathetic viewpoints on imperialism, nationalism, and jingoism throughout their lifetime. Today, you too can apply for funds directly from the evil entity formerly known as the Department of Defense to get your own project made, provided you're willing to lick the dirtiest boot in human history, as far too many successful public figures are. As a side note, The Box was later re-recorded to make the vocal delivery cleaner for a more palatable single to promote the album. That makes this track and the music video for Stupid the only active measures the label took to boost sales. So it seems like they were most interested in politically charged anthems. If they were hoping to court Rage Against the Machine's considerable audience, a bold and risky choice that might have been more fruitful is Snooze Button. While Stupid and The Box are laser-focused on tackling one subject with very few words, our next song is wall-to-wall lyrics that impart general political consciousness with incisive fury. Sure, everyone today is sick to death of hearing left-wing causes being described as woke, and the truth is, it was a cliche in the 90s too. Even Rage's 1992 debut had a song called Wake Up. Snooze Button is well aware of this, as acknowledged in its opening line.
Well, it's just another song talking about how you let them take your rights. Another redundant verse about how you're a piece of fighting lost. What cost? Your cause has got no champion. How could you hope to win by just complaining? Now it's raining on your very decisions. Make it cost you dearly. Not just your money, but your freedom or your wealthy. Improper choices could be deadly. They took your soul downright. You didn't even fight. Well, it's your motherfucking wake up call.
So, things are bad. Probably much worse than most of us even realize. But there are laws in place to keep things from getting too bad, and if those laws get repealed, well, it's amazing what you can get used to. All you gotta do is keep your head down and wait it out until the next election cycle. Then we can blue wave ourselves back into safety, right?
While you were busy fucking sleeping, you know your government was creeping. Somebody left the door unlocked. You see where life was bought and sold. Yes, to the highest bidder. Left you in sitcom hell, sick bitch, you're doing what you said back.
I'm starting to get the impression that Lin would be extremely disappointed if, say, a Nazi who'd had their reputation laundered by a game show played on bigotry and political stagnation to take unchallenged control of the government for the purposes of obliterating the concept of rights for marginalized groups and anyone just hoping to feed themselves by working at a job. That sort of thing would be precisely what he spent a quarter of this album grabbing you by the shoulders and screaming in your face to prevent at all costs. But this song isn't about that worst-case scenario. It's about the world he was living in when he wrote it, the mid-1990s, which was also the last time when Americans largely agreed that things were going great. That's where the brilliance of this song's title comes in, because he's not just talking about waking up to the dangers of political apathy. It's about resisting the urge to fall back asleep when a facade of decency is in place. That snooze button can be tempting, but it's just going to put you in a worse situation in the long run. We're all well aware of how bad things are right now, and most of us can agree on a specific target that we can blame. But I saw far less engagement when abortion bans were legalized. The first ever anti-trans bill to stick was passed in Arkansas, and almost every state followed suit. Police and ICE budgets were expanded further as a flex against popular demands that they be defunded. And the commissioners of genocide against the Palestinian people received billions in American funding, all of which happened during the last Democratic administration. Even if you still value electoralism after 46 consecutive evil US presidents, this is the stuff that loses elections for Democrats, so you still have to fight them on it, or they'll just keep losing. Thankfully, you can fight them. Political power is a social contract granted to elected officials on the grounds that they serve their constituents, and in actuality, we wield that power, despite the well-curated illusion of omnipotence projected by most politicians. You know, I just double-checked this lyric in the liner notes of the album, and I think the words as written are even better than what I've been mishearing for most of my life. But I'm gonna miss the image of piñatas that always came to mind when I heard it. Anyway, with the closing riffs of Snooze Button, the part of the album that directly addresses politics is over. Lin doesn't even open his mouth again for another 3.5 minutes, tying a bow on the first chapter of the album with a melancholic instrumental prelude to the title track, Get Some. Knowing what you do about the band by now, when you see a song called Get Some, you'd expect another invitation to an ass-whooping, or at least a crude sex joke. So you might be caught off guard when what it delivers is a guided tour of Lin's personal demons. He describes suffering a crisis of faith that has left him to question why he shouldn't give in to his worst instincts, knowing full well that his addictive personality would turn a moment's weakness into a life-altering relapse. And yet, he deals with wounds that run deeper than even he can grasp, so while the drugs come with their own set of problems, they keep these other, less obvious issues from consuming him, leaving him in a precarious balancing act that he fears he can only maintain for so long. Mikey has reported that Lin did start to dabble in harder drugs again after they signed with Geffen, and while I found no indication of serious repercussions, this choice seems to weigh heavy on his mind. Lin had a profound self-awareness for a guy in his 20s, and he seems resolute that his introspective nature will see him through in this battle for survival. In 1993, Christopher Coppola, nephew of filmmaking legend Francis Ford Coppola, was set to make his own directorial debut. His cast for this movie was fantastic. Michael Biehn in the lead role, Peter Fonda and Charlie Sheen make prominent appearances. That's Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees. The list goes on and on. But the most important name in the credits is that of Christopher Coppola's brother, Nicolas Cage. The resulting film is called Deadfall, and it is an absolute catastrophe. After Val Kilmer wriggled his way out of playing the lead role just before shooting began, the studio slashed the budget to less than half of what it had been. But I don't think any amount of money could have salvaged the convoluted, pointless, incoherent script. The movie was critically reviled on release, made a devastating $18,000 in the box office, and promptly disappeared from the memories of the handful of people who ever knew it existed in the first place. Or so everyone involved hoped. 4 years after this fiasco, Snot would immortalize Deadfall in song. It's such a baffling choice. It would be like writing a song about Willy's Wonderland today, because bad Nick Cage movies are as much a constant as human rights violations are, I guess. In Deadfall, Nick plays what the main character describes as a badass con man in his uncle's criminal empire. But you soon realize that all their crimes amount to Jimmy McGill pranks, and this badass is actually pathetic. He's too scared to collect on debts, his girlfriend hates him, and he's on the verge of a complete breakdown. That breakdown arrives about halfway through the film, and the ensuing 10 minutes are what this song is really about. Nick's performance could be described as an act of bullying his older brother by sabotaging the film. He tramples anything the script could have possibly intended with the most over-the-top performance of his entire career, which is saying a hell of a lot.
Put the gun down, man.
All this musical tribute had to do was recreate Nick's most explosive line deliveries, and voila! Instant lyrical genius.
Okay, baby girl. Who sent ya? Who sent ya? Sam fucking Beckenbaugh. Who sent ya, baby girl? Someone's trying to kill me, man!
Who would try to kill you, Eddie?
The fucking hangers! Someone's trying to kill me, man! The fucking hangers! Well, vive la fucking France, man! Well, vive la fucking France, man! Hi fucking ya! Hi fucking ya!
This might be the most frivolous song on the album, but those movie quotes are some of Snot's most iconic lyrics, and you'll never forget the bluegrass breakdown. Truly a testament to this band's ability to spin gold from just about anything. So, all those years ago, Lynn had the social consciousness to foresee our current societal strife. He was an ally to LGBTQ folks and people of color, and he had an unironic appreciation for Nick Cage's nouveau shamanic acting style. Was there any way this guy wasn't decades ahead of his time? Well, yeah.
Let us lie like your time. I'm telling you what you want to hear. What do you really take me? That's what you need to feel before you spread them legs for me.
I Just Lie goes into Lynn's philosophy on pickup artistry. Simply tell a woman you want to have sex with anything she wants to hear. Don't let the truth get in the way of closing the deal, and sever all ties once you get what you wanted. This has led to an incel-adjacent interpretation on the song's Genius page that blames women for making manipulation tactics a necessity due to their impossibly high standards of only sleeping with people when they want to. And that is a perfectly valid reading of what's being said here. The whole song is presented as a joke, but it's really not that huge of a stretch from Lynn's actual reputation as a ladies' man. So there is without a doubt some sincerity. Many of those who are drawn to manosphere identities get there by hating women and viewing them as worthy of dehumanization, which is absolutely not the case with Lynn. He had a long-term girlfriend when this song was written, and there's every indication that they were very devoted to one another, and that she was cool with his sleeping around. She even appeared with him and another girl in the porno Lynn did. Yes, of course Lynn shot a porn scene. I doubt anyone watching this would be surprised to hear that. He was also friends with outspoken feminist Terry B, an LA rapper who fronted the band Tura Satana. On a song called Down, which Lynn co-wrote with her, she condemns rape culture and sexual commodification, with which Lynn voices his solidarity and commitment to fight these issues.
Bullshit! You can fuck that American dream! Living in America, I know what it means to be all wealthy, have no health care, walk down the street and be scared. I'm prepared for a system that's built on hate. Yo! And gives permission to rape, discriminates against color while it wrecks and disrespects my sex. I ain't down.
Down for the system. That's why I resist.
While it is hypocritical and gross to write a song about your disdain for the inconvenience other people's bodily autonomy presents in getting what you want, it's not the full picture on Lynn's attitude towards women, but it's still important to discuss because of Woodstock 99. 2 years after the release of Get Some, nu metal fans gathered in droves for a hellish corporate festival that broke out into rioting during Limp Bizkit's performance. It has been reported that sexual harassment was pervasive throughout the event, and that multiple instances of sexual assault occurred during the riot. Snot bears no responsibility whatsoever for these unspeakable crimes, nor even should Limp Bizkit take any blame for being the last straw at a volatile event. Rather, both of these artists are reflections of normalized misogyny from within the culture that spawned them, but they did do their part in reinforcing that normalization. This is why I put so much value in artists using their platform to break that feedback loop before terrible ideas become terrible actions, which Snot pointedly did not do with I Just Lie. An instrumental reprise of Get Some closes out this chapter of the album and leads into Unplugged, a warning to other musicians not to sell out their art to the demands of their label. Snot was uncommonly charmed in this regard. The biggest label in the world let them make whatever sex jokes and Nick Cage references they wanted. But the subject of labels compromising and exploiting their artists could easily fill its own video essay. In fact, it's already a 3-part series over on Spencer Cornelia's channel, which I highly recommend you check out, because it's shocking how bad the music industry has gotten. To grossly oversimplify it, musicians who want representation are increasingly pushed into 360 contracts, which give up to 80% of all revenue they generate back to the label. This pays for the label's overhead and sends profits up to the top, while the artists doing the work are driven into debt regardless of the success of their output. It's a system that has already killed the careers of many artists, and unfortunately, Snot's recommendation to read between the lines of your contracts may no longer be sufficient to stay afloat in the industry. Similarly naive is the next song, Takato, a scared straight narrative about the danger of gateway drugs that earns little more than an eye roll if you live through the DARE program. For anyone who isn't a millennial, DARE was an education curriculum run by cops intended to prevent kids from using drugs by using threats of carceral violence. It was notorious for employing these kinds of fear-mongering tactics, which usually resulted in a room full of students stifling laughter for an hour, then seeking out the drugs they just learned about. Unfortunately, Takato is a banger that has closed many of their live sets on a high note, so you're gonna want to listen to it, even though it tells you that the inevitable punishment for smoking your first joint is blazing onward. The band is joined by Theo Kogan from the Lunatics for Mr. Brett, an open letter to Brett Gurewitz. Brett is the guitarist for legendary hardcore band Bad Religion and founder of the Epitaph record label. Therefore, he is a sellout record mogul with a hand in watering down the entire punk scene throughout the 90s. According to the rapid-fire lyrics of this merciless iconoclastic screed anyway. Today, Snot's drummer Jamie Miller is a full-time member of Bad Religion with Brett, which has to be akin to one of those boardroom scenes where a guy tells off his boss and gets a raise for it.
Sorry, man, that's bullshit.
I heard that. You're right. It's bullshit. I'm promoting you.
Again?
Yes.
Cool!
And last but not least, we have a Muzak rendition of Get Some to conclude our hard day's work in the punk rock nu metal mines on a peaceful note. Hold on. Looks like Lynn has one last important announcement before we go.
My balls, your check!
Oh, so this is why Lynn thought his naked body would make a perfect billboard for the album. Is it any wonder people underestimated this on their first listen? I literally could have titled this video From Snot to Balls, the story of Get Some, and all it would have cost me was any credibility my political analyses might have had. This track at first resembles the crude and aggressively sexual attitudes of I Just Lie, and there is a little of that, but I give it a pass due to the sheer audacity, leaving no possibility anyone might take this seriously. This one actually has much more in common with their eponymous anthem, The phrase, "my balls, your chin," is a bespoke alternative to the middle finger that was coined by a friend of Mikey's and is used here to defend the band's honor. I have no idea who was out for their blood to make them think that they had to shout down their haters so often, but it made for some of their best work, so I'm not complaining. With so many fun, frivolous jams throughout Get Some, if your takeaway was that this is a party record that's got some impressive musicianship and muscle without being too heavy, that's honestly correct. That's one of their stated goals. Everything you heard on this record was recorded with the full band playing together in the studio simultaneously, excluding the drum track and possibly some studio magic here and there, but it was mostly live to tape. This is an uncommon approach, but definitely the right move. The concert energy they brought to a recorded medium is unparalleled in my experience. Still, those darker moments are part of the tapestry, with moody instrumentals to ensure they aren't overlooked. And that means the heavy political subjects are also an inseparable aspect of Snot's legacy, just as Lynn's proud womanizing is. Unfortunately, all the intent behind this beloved artistic statement was soon overshadowed by an event outside anyone's control. On December 11th, 1998, Lynn was traveling on the 101 freeway in Los Angeles with Dobbs in the vehicle when it was struck by oncoming traffic. Lynn Straight and Dobbs passed away from the injuries they sustained in the collision. This accident took place at a notoriously dangerous spot on the freeway where Lynn would have had to cross southbound traffic in order to head north, and that area has since been blocked off to prevent any further loss of life. For all of his larger-than-life antics, Lynn suffered a fate that could have befallen anyone. Motor vehicle accidents claimed the lives of 41,000 other Americans that same year. The band had been hard at work on the follow-up to Get Some, but when they received the news of Lynn's passing, it was understood that Snot was over. Replacing a frontman is always extremely difficult, and this was a group that had thrived due to their close friendships and artistic chemistry. So they agreed that there would be no attempt to carry on without Lynn. There was, however, one more collaborative effort some of the band members wanted to pursue. An entire tribute album to commemorate Lynn, titled Straight Up. This album would feature guest vocals from the singers of bands Snot was close with, which included many of the biggest names in music at that time, all pouring their hearts out over the recent loss of a man they loved and respected. Creating Straight Up was an excruciating ordeal, especially for the bereaved Mikey and Toomer, who had to write about a dozen new songs in styles befitting the participating singers. Some of those songs used repurposed material originally intended for a later Snot release, but much of the tribute album had to be written from scratch. There were also issues with all the different record labels representing each artist giving them a hard time, but the guest vocalists unanimously threw their full weight behind the project to ensure this obstacle would be overcome. Straight Up was released on November 7th, 2000, with all proceeds from sales going to Lynn's mother. The creation of an entire record of original songs to remember and celebrate someone is an unprecedented outpouring of love from a community, and many of these artists go above and beyond to give some of the rawest, most unfiltered performances of their careers. There's just a palpable sincerity to the expression of what Lynn meant to them and how much it hurts to lose him that you have to hear to believe. On a personal note, I've been dealing with grief myself after a recent loss that was sudden and heartbreaking, and re-listening to Straight Up honestly helped me through that process. There's a vulnerability to these guys working out on the page, feelings that they're actively processing themselves, that gave me a sense of kinship and understanding, a bit like a group therapy session. In fact, if you put the disc in a CD-ROM drive, there's a section where they talk about some of the feelings they were having while making the album. One of them outright says it was like therapy for them, too. It was really helpful of them to put this out for the sake of fans who are going through this with them and everyone since who's had to deal with the most difficult part of life. So I just wanted to thank Snot and everyone involved for being there when I needed them. Lynn appears on his own commemorative tribute album, singing the last song they completed in his lifetime, eerily titled Absent. This came to be the final word on the band's legacy, and ever since, whenever Snot was spoken of, the word tragedy was never far behind. It does a great disservice to everyone when an artist's talent, unique voice, life's passion, everything is overlooked in favor of the sad facts of their departure from this world. Almost every song on Get Some was about something for which Lynn cared deeply, from the music industry to bigotry to drug abuse to partying, all expertly crafted by a band of brothers to make for a live show that would get you to forget the shitty state of things for one night, then go out and do something about it the next. To me, this is how Snot should be remembered. Those of us who didn't get to experience Snot's domination of the stage got a taste of what we missed in 2002 with the release of a live album, featuring another new studio song for which Lynn had laid down vocals. The song is an unfinished demo, however, and given how hard to understand Lynn was with all the production value in the world behind him, there's no hope of deriving a meaning behind this rough, incomplete track. Snot would go on to reunite years later, first in 2008, where they would adopt the name Tons, and returning from the mirror dimension in 2014 to play again as Snot. 3 different singers would perform with them during these reunions, each coming and going as their availability permitted. They also put out some new songs as Tons, and a couple more as Snot, but rock and metal were in a bad place at that time, and they never got a foothold before other opportunities pulled the members in separate directions. They were mostly there for the love of the game. They wanted to play Snot songs again, so they did, for a couple years at a time. But after the second reunion ran its course, we were left woefully snotless for a decade. Today, the world is ready for a true Snot comeback, as proven by the excitement surrounding the Snot comeback that's already underway. They saw the big mainstream resurgence of nu metal in the 2020s, made evident by many of their old friends returning to superstardom with the Sick New World Festival. And since joining those ranks themselves, they've been making their strongest showing in decades. They began to tease a return to the stage in late 2024, keeping their new vocalist's identity hidden until their first show with him. This singer was revealed to be young newcomer Andy Knapp, and his ability to do justice to Lynn's unique stage presence has been proven throughout many live performances already. Soon, we can expect to see what Snot's current lineup can really do with original material that they expect to start releasing in 2026. I hope they write a song about the 2017 direct-to-DVD sequel to Deadfall in which Nick Cage reprises his role. Almost 30 years after making his loudest statement to the world, Lynn Strait is now being discussed with love and celebration. The funerary vibes surrounding his name seem to have finally dissipated, and the modern reassessment of his writing is ongoing. I cannot personally say that I was radicalized by the guy who got a blowjob on a toilet in front of 20,000 Limp Bizkit fans, but I wish I had been, because the songs on Get Some are extremely sharp, inspiring, and most of all, hopeful. Fuck the haters is just another way of saying, do not comply in advance. And that sentiment always shines through in the most powerful moments of even the darkest songs Lynn wrote. Nihilism is poisoning many of those who could be taking small actions to hasten the collapse of a fascist reign that will come to a humiliating conclusion, and the sooner the better. Just remember, if your highest aim is to change this, the best you can hope for is to give fascism a little nap before it comes back even stronger. What we need to change is this, and the future gets a little brighter every time someone realizes that. The defining ethos of Snot is to be radically authentic in what you do, and they stand today as proof that even when things look bleak and you don't single-handedly change the world by yourself, the impact you make with your fans, friends, messages, and actions makes an invaluable difference.
What he